A doctor, somebody called Dr. David Lloyd, talking in the same fascistic terms about laws that should be brought in to make people have the vaccination. Let's have a listen.
I'm not suggesting that we don't look after them, but I'm suggesting we should adjust the balance. And we can do that by making it compulsory for people to be having their vaccines and compulsory for people to wear a mask in public. It's not an awful ask, is it?
Yes, it is, you fool. What an absolute idiot. It's a question of freedom, of liberty. This is a free democracy. We can't bring in laws to force people to undergo medical procedures. It's outrageous, or to wear masks for that matter. This is a freedom issue that will concern our first guest very much. It is the Chief Executive of the Freedom Association, Andrew Allison. Good evening, Andrew.
Good evening, Kevin.
I mean, listen to that guy. I mean, what on earth is it? That's a doctor saying that we should make it compulsory by law for every citizen of this country, every resident of this country, to have the government vaccine, to have chemicals pumped into your arm by order of the government. That's a doctor. That's an educated person. What on earth are these people thinking?
Well, he's certainly not looking at the science, as they like to call it, because anyone who's had a vaccine can get COVID and can pass on COVID. Now, people say that the chances of doing that are limited. Fair enough, I accept that. But the whole point of getting a vaccine is that it protects you against the worst that COVID has to offer. It is not up to the government, and we've never done this before either, Kevin. We've never forced people to have vaccines, any form of vaccine, to live in this country. And it's a really dangerous precedent. And when you look at what's happening on the streets of Europe, it's quite frightening. I mean, I don't condone rioting, I don't condone violence, but I certainly do approve of peaceful demonstrations. I imagine that many demonstrations, and I hope that they will be peaceful, will start erupting all across Europe.
Yes, we've got obviously big demonstrations in Holland, where they've reimposed a winter lockdown for the duration. In Germany, there is great unrest because they have very, very strict measures there. They've got medical apartheid going there. If you've been vaccinated, you can pretty much go about your normal life, going to bars, restaurants, theatres, etc., shops. But if you haven't, you're a second-class citizen shuffling along the streets darkly, not allowed anywhere. So they've got medical apartheid there. Plus, of course, Austria, where they've brought in the ultimate illiberal measure, vaccination by law, which is just outrageous. So, yes, we can discuss the efficacy of the vaccine till the cows come home. But what I want to discuss here, Andrew, is the fact that we in Britain must never do that. This is a question of individual liberty. The state cannot take the decision whether or not we have or undergo a medical procedure away from us, can it?
No, it can't. And the only reason I mentioned the efficacy of the vaccine is just showing how stupid it is as well as being completely illiberal. But of course, this is happening in the UK. I believe in Scotland, you can buy a drink at a bar, but you must sit down. You can't stand up if you haven't had a vaccine. If you have had a vaccine, then of course you can dance, but you can't dance if you have had a vaccine. I mean, this is actually going on in the UK as we speak. There's all sorts of illiberal things happening. I mean, I found out just this morning that the Durham Cathedral are offering worshippers there through Advent and Christmas the choice of either having a vaccine or prove that you've had a test or prove that you've had COVID, or you won't even be allowed into the cathedral to worship.
I wonder what God thinks of that. The house of God is supposed to be open to all, but apparently not. If you haven't had the vaccine.
I mean, Jesus didn't just say, "Oh, I welcome all the healthy and all you sick people go away." I mean, that wasn't the message of the gospel. But this is happening, and incidentally, that is against Church of England rules. So it is happening. It's happening all over the place. I mean, it can be government mandated, as is happening in Austria, or indeed it can just be individual organisations here in the UK and devolved governments, of course, in the UK, who are then deciding who can do what, who can go into a nightclub, who can go into a pub, who can go into a cinema, who can go into a theatre. I mean, this is such a dangerous, slippery slope. These are our freedoms.
Yes.
They're ours. They're not for the government to take away from us.
And you're right. A lot of private organisations, even though in England you don't need vaccine passports or any proof of jab, a double jab, treble jab, whatever the current number is, lots of private places are demanding them. Theatres in the West End in particular. And I think that's a worrying precedent. And you know, this is the moment where I think we as citizens of this country have to say no. As I say, I'm sure you agree, Andrew, as the chief executive of the Freedom Association, that what this is about freedom of choice. And I absolutely stand foursquare behind anyone who wants to decide to take the vaccine. That is their right in a free country, just as it is the right of someone to decide not to have it. I think both sections of society should be treated exactly the same. We must not demonize those who decide not to have the vaccine. And this is what I was saying to my friends on Saturday night, you know, left-leaning North London liberals. I said, well, what is it that makes you feel that your decision to have the vaccine is superior to someone's decision not to have the vaccine? That's what we're talking about, isn't it? The automatic assumption that to decide to have the vaccine is the right and proper thing to do, and to decide not to have to do that is somehow wrong.
Yeah, it's almost back to the Brexit debate, isn't it? You know, those people who voted for Brexit were idiots and fools and shouldn't really be allowed to vote. And those who voted Remain were absolutely sensible, intelligent people. And it's almost the same here, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You know, it's only these idiots who don't want one. But some people don't want one. They've had a bad reaction maybe to one jab. They've got friends who've had a bad reaction. And there's a variety of reasons.
But I don't think, Andrew,
take it.
Andrew,
it's their choice.
In the end, you know, there may be all sorts of very legitimate reasons for not taking the vaccine. But as far as I'm concerned, if someone comes to the conclusion they don't want to take the vaccine because they think little green men have put microchips in the vaccine, I mean, absolute nonsense. But if that's the reason for their decision, they've still got the right to make that decision. It's a free country.
Exactly. No, I completely agree with you. And it is their choice. It's their choice to make that decision. And this is what is being taken away. But it's happening all over the world, as we know. I mean, you look at some of the excesses in Canada and Australia and New Zealand. We can't forget New Zealand, where Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister, said, the government is your only source of truth. I mean, she actually said that and used those words. And this is now creeping all across Europe. Why? Because they're panicking. And, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of Boris Johnson, but while I give him his due, we did open up the country more or less throughout the summer. This has allowed COVID to spread amongst a lot of younger people who are not affected by it. A child in my son's class at school, 5 years old, got COVID. His mother said you wouldn't even think there was anything wrong with him. And because of this, a lot of people, a lot of younger people are getting natural immunity to COVID. And this is exactly what we want. You know, so freedom works on many different levels, but it also works in actually protecting the vulnerable long term.
Yes, I mean, that's another thing we have to think about, isn't it? I mean, I know COVID is bad, but just how bad is it? I mean, you know, in this country, certainly in England, it's not exactly the bubonic plague right now, is it? Yeah. And if you look at Wales and Scotland with their month-long vaccine passport system, they've got worse COVID rates than us. Wales, which has had a pretty strict COVID health document system for a month, has the worst COVID rates in Britain. England hasn't had any vaccine passports at all. We've been allowed to gather at football matches and cinemas, pubs, restaurants, as if nothing was happening, as if it wasn't a COVID crisis. And guess what? Our rates are falling. We are, in pretty good shape. So these measures brought about by human beings to combat this virus don't seem to work. And as you say, Andrew, in fairness to Boris, he decided in July it is time to face this virus down. And it seems to be paying dividends. Why can't these other governments see that they can't? They're too feeble to do anything about this virus. I think we have to actually go for herd immunity, don't you?
Well, precisely, because COVID is on a world tour, and it's not going to stop until it tries to infect everybody on the planet. But as you quite rightly said, for the majority of people who get COVID, it doesn't really make much difference. You might get a bad cold, you might feel a bit fluey. Many people don't even get any symptoms whatsoever. There are some who do get seriously ill, and we know who those people are. They're people with underlying health conditions, people who are overweight, people who tend to get who are a little bit older. So we know exactly who those people are. And, you know, I've mentioned this before on your show, Kevin, but it's worth reminding listeners and viewers again. Around about a year ago, Matt Hancock, when he was health secretary, said all we have to do is vaccinate the elderly and the vulnerable, and then we can cry freedom. Yeah. That's what he said. Yeah. And that was exactly right. That he was completely right. I didn't disagree with anything that he said there. But the government has now gone on a strange path where it literally wants to jab everybody in the country. And you have to ask, is that really necessary? Because for very young children, for example, well, not very young, not babies, but, you know, toddlers upwards, you know, a dose of COVID isn't going to do them any harm at all. It's going to give them natural immunity. So this freedom argument worked. It worked on all sorts of different levels. And it's going to, and I think it's going to prove as well that in the UK, we got it right. In Sweden, they pretty much got it right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But these other European countries have actually got it badly wrong.
And I think if Boris and Sajid even dare to go close to what Germany's doing, or maybe even mimicking Scotland and Wales, you know, and they talk about cancelling Christmas, if they go into that territory, make no mistake, I don't want this to happen, but there will be riots here as well.
Oh, there'll be trouble. Of course there will be. The British people will not accept it. But, you know, maybe I should offer some advice here, if I may be bold to do so.
Please do.
You have to start fighting against this. And that also means that any of those venues that decide to ban people because they haven't had a COVID jab, don't use them. Simple as that. Boycott them. And those businesses will soon get the message. So you mentioned West End theatres that are doing this. Decide you're not going to go to the West End for the next 6 months. They've already had a torrid time. If they're going to start insisting on people having COVID passports, make sure they have an even more torrid time. And eventually the message will get through, but it requires people power. It requires us, all of us, to act in this way and to vote with our feet. You know, we there's no good just whinging about it and complaining about it and saying, woe is me, but this is what the times we're living in and there's nothing that we can do about it. No, you have to take action. And that is the only way that we will defeat them.
I think there may be an interesting few months ahead. Andrew, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for your